So funny enough, I was at RSA, and it was not very good. And we're probably not going to go again because we didn't have demo stations like this. So we might just go next year. Or we went to Black Hat as well, so I'll instruct our marketers to try these demo stations. So I'm going to talk about demonstrating technical interfaces. And the reality is that anybody can demonstrate a technical interface. You can take a screenshot, and you can put it in Navattic, right? But I think it's not good enough. It's not interactive enough. And whenever I create demos, I just have this pride in, let's make it better, right? And what's great about Navattic is that it works really well for SaaS products because it's a HTML representation of the product. But technical interfaces don't have a HTML representation. I've done demos of Windows applications or Mac applications. They don't have an interpretation in HTML. So what do you do, right? So I'll talk a little bit about that. For Kristen, right, they have a server-side product. The server-side product probably doesn't have an interface, but they might want to demo it. So how do you do that? Cool. So my name is Jakub. I'm a director of solutions at an open source software load balancer company called HAProxy. But I'm also an owner of a small boutique consultancy called All Things Demo, where I actually implement interactive demos. I work with like a couple customers a year to just do interesting stuff. So that doesn't mean don't contact me because you don't know what's interesting to me. Funny enough, also, I was head of global pre-sales at Acquia, Laura's competitor. I've done a lot of interactive demo there. If you want to go next, if you remember just 3 things from today, I would like you to remember these 3 things. 1 is suspend disbelief. 2 is so what? And then, because we're talking about technical interfaces, anything can be done and recreated, right? And I'll talk a little bit about that. So I also think about what's our job. And look, I'm not here to tell you what your job is, but this is how I think about what we're trying to do here. And that's really to create demos of our products, right? And I actually think that's not true, right? We're not here to create demos of our products. We're here to suspend disbelief. And that's make it believable enough for our customers and prospects that this product exists and does what it says on the tin. That's the job, right? And if you go to the next one, the next is our job is so what? When I started being a pre-sales person, I had this boss who, every time I did a demo or presented a slide, he had like a small paper, letter paper, and it said, so what? And every time I did something, he just said. And it was extremely annoying, but I learned so much, right? So what? Why do I care? Why does the customer care? And that's also the case for technical interfaces, right? So let's get into technical interfaces. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I've done it and what I've done with some of them, right? By the way, before we go to the next slide, I say we're in the business of suspending disbelief and so what. But I actually don't think that's true. We're in the business of selling more deals, bigger deals, faster, generating ecstatic customers, and crushing the competition, right? That's our business. So ultimately, even the demo doesn't matter. What matters is winning the deals if you're on the sales side, which is what I am, right? So let's go to the next one. Again, anything can be recreated. And what I'm going to do is show you a few examples of interfaces that I've recreated and give you maybe an idea of how, right? So let's go to the next one. So this is Octeto. It's a Kubernetes development environments company. And it's really great because you can quickly spin up a Kubernetes environment and go for it, right? But everything they do is about developers. And developers don't go into SaaS product software interfaces. They work with code and code interfaces. So the problem was, how do we show that? So this is a typical IDE, right? Like a code interface. This is Visual Studio Code. And we wanted to do a little bit more than a screenshot because in the original slides that didn't work, this was actually animated. So as they typed something into the terminal, they see what's happening. So I recreated that, and it was a huge success. And the way I actually did it, if you want to go to the next screen, is you can actually download Visual Studio Code as a software editor. But turns out that's actually an HTML interface. And so you just need to run that as an HTML interface and then take the captures with Navattic. And if you don't want to run that, I use Red Hat Developer Sandbox. I just Googled it and Googled so long until I found one that was just running for me, right? And I used this to create the visual code editor for the user so I can capture it and show them editing code directly in Navattic without taking screenshots, because that was just not good enough. There was a trick in the previous one that when it was animating, they typed something, something start. I actually created an animated GIF that then I manually inserted into the Navattic, into the interface. So it's animated and looping as if they're typing into the interface, right? If you go to the next one, this was a little bit more complicated. Can you recognize this interface? Yeah, this is Windows, right? Windows 11. So this is Nasuni, pretty cool company doing like storage, hybrid storage for companies inside Mac, Linux, Windows, and everything else. And there's no point in looking at the interface of the company like the SaaS interface. There's some interesting stuff, and we've shown that. But the result, the so what, is a user using it inside their Windows. So I wanted to create an interface inside Windows, right? So we actually really took a Windows interface and did an interactive demo of showing them browsing through files in the Windows interface. But this is suspending disbelief. This is not a Windows interface. It looks like a Windows interface, right? And you're looking at it for how long? 15 seconds? I think Navattic knows much better than me how long it takes a user to go through and how long they spend, but not that much, right? So if you go to next, I found a person on GitHub that recreated Windows in HTML and React. And so I just used that. And I'm a technical person, right? So I ran it on DigitalOcean in a virtual machine, and it was just running. And I made changes by changing the folders, so they had some ransomware protection. So I've changed the names of the files to be like, your ransomware encrypted, pay me crypto, and things like that. And then show them the result after the recovery and everything else, right? It wasn't a Windows interface, it was this. So you can use that every time. If you go to the next one, this is a typical one if you have like an integration product or a developer product. It's a command line interface. Marketers hate command line interfaces in demos, yeah, right? But it's gotta be done sometimes. And the solution engineers do it all the time, but if your entire product is in a command line, what do you do? So I did an HTML representation of a command line interface where you can type commands and put them into Navattic, right? So you can just type npx. This was a demo for Cloudflare that I just tested. So you can just type something, press enter. I've experimented. It was somewhat OK, but not 100%, that you can actually type, and then Navattic would detect that you typed and then take you to the next screen, like do the real thing. But I still chose to have the next button because you got to make it easy, right? But this is not a terminal. This is, if you go to the next slide, somebody recreated a HTML version of a terminal, and you can run that. And this is actually a real thing, right? There are people running this in production. And actually, if you log in into like AWS or Google Cloud, they give you a terminal inside Windows. Not inside Windows, inside your browser. And it runs something like this. So anything can be recreated, right? If you go to next, I also have a bonus one. So if you go to the next one, and don't go to the next one yet. But does this remind you of an interface? I'm suspending the disbelief, right? So this is an HTML representation of the Mac Finder window. And it exists out there. You can download it from GitHub. But I did it differently. If you go to the next one, I did this. I did this last night. I took a screenshot of my Finder window from my Mac. I uploaded it to Claude and said, recreated this HTML. And it did take about 30 minutes of wrangling, right? I don't like the icons. Change them to blue, OK. I need the red, yellow, green. It didn't do it. It made them gray. So I did digital color meter, make this icon red, make this icon yellow, green, and everything else. So it did take 30 minutes. Anything can be recreated. And this gives me imposter syndrome, by the way. Like, why are we here if it can do all of this? I honestly think that's ridiculous at this point, right? But if you have a Mac app, this would be viable. It would probably need another 30 minutes of work or manually change the icons to be real icons. I think Claude just doesn't have access to the real icons. But you could do something like this, right? So if you go to next, suspend disbelief, right? You don't have to show them the real product. They just have to believe it's the real product, right? You need to always look at so what. Why do I care? And so that's why in my little consultancy, I build demos, but building demos is so easy. They made it so easy. What to show in the demos is what matters. And then anything can be recreated and shown, even if you're a technical product. So that's all I had for you. Thank you.